Alright, what is up, guys? So today our first video, excluding the intro, would be about proper studying. I'm going to be learning how I can study properly and try to improve the way that I learn. Like just note taking and memorization, stuff like that. And so we're gonna be doing that because I feel like whatever I study or whatever new skill that I'm trying to learn, I just forget it and I just don't take my notes properly, and it just feels pointless at the end. And obviously, I feel like there's always a way to improve whatever you're doing and how you do it. And I know that people can get stubborn, they feel like they know themselves, who else is gonna know them? They know how they remember stuff, but I feel like there is a right way to do things, not all the time, but obviously obviously everyone has their own personal touch, but there is some guidelines that I feel like I should learn and that I don't know about. And so by doing this, I hope to improve the way that I study, improve the way that I learn, and that it will be much more effortless and just less friction for whatever I want to achieve. And I do have a lot to achieve. I feel like right now I feel like I have achieved nothing. I have done nothing in my life. I have no skill, no interests that I'm really passionate about, except for like comic books, I guess. But even still, this is a journey, and let's start by improving how we study. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to try by reading a few books. I have a few books on trying to improve the way that I study, and I just found it online, just googled it. So anyways, I have my tablet here. I'm going to be, well, I've done some work, but the first book we're going to be reading is How to Read a Book. Wow, I feel like a toddler, but you gotta feel like a toddler if you wanna learn something. So anyways, let's get started. I'm gonna read it, highlight a few things, and let's see where it goes. Alright, so just a little side note, a little break, and I feel like I am getting too distracted. I'm not used to having a camera in front of me while I do my work, and I feel like that is an issue. But rest assured, I will continue studying, and I will give you my thoughts on the whole thing in after I finish, reading the book. But anyways, just so far the progress is pretty good. I'll review the book, and just a reminder, everything worthwhile is always hard. I know that sounds so generic and all, but I feel like we as humans, especially nowadays, we really always skip, or we don't see, or basically we're blind to the struggle part of anything in life, whether it's about other people, about viewing other people's success, or about thinking our achievements. I feel like we really underestimate the struggle, basically, and we don't really view it. But yeah, right now I definitely am struggling to read this book. I will let you know in a while. But anyways, see you in a bit. Alright, so it has been around. Well, I've read the book called How to Read for around, I want to say 3 days. And it's been more than 3 days, you know. There was the weekend and I didn't have time to, well, record. But yeah, book was a 3 day read. It was a hard read. And my thoughts on it is that first I would rate the book, I want to say 5 out of 10. It's a really middle ground. And those 5 stars are mostly because the advice it gives you is pretty useful. I'd say very useful. But the thing is, the book is pretty old. I think it's from 1970s. So the language, the way the author writes, it's just different from modern times, which I mean it's good, but then again, the book does not follow its own advice. So the book basically talks about how it tells you like some concepts or like some techniques to help you understand the book, and it talks about how what you should do and how a book is written and stuff like that. But especially the part the author talks about how a book is, at its very core, it has a core which the author calls the skeleton. It's like the whole structure of the book, and it has flesh on top of it, which is his way of saying filler, basically. You know, it's just some filler material. But the author himself has put way too much filler stuff, way too many analogies. He repeats himself constantly, and I don't know if it's on purpose, because he is trying to teach you how to get past a book's filler, get past the book's, you know, unnecessary parts. So I don't know if he's trying to teach a lesson, if we are supposed to do it, but yeah, the book definitely has a lot of unnecessary words. I feel like he can cut it down by like 50 pages. But basically, what the book is about, the main thing it tells us is that there's 3 levels of reading. First is elementary, which is just reading it, just the lowest level. You just read the words and that's it. And then there's inspectional reading, which is the next level, which you have to skim through the book, just on a time limit, skim through it, and you gotta focus on the parts that you do understand. This part, I feel like that's a pretty good lesson, you know. He says how in society or school, we usually try to focus on what we don't understand, and how we try to understand it and then move on, which basically negates the whole point of reading a book. He says you gotta first look at the big picture, and so you gotta read what you know and use what you know to fill in the blanks and figure out what you don't know. So it will be like a mental exercise, and that's how you train your brain to read a book within itself without like external help. Like, you know, I mean, obviously 1970s, this was before googling stuff was common, but yeah, nowadays I feel like it's much easier to get external help rather than just focusing on the book. And I feel like, yeah, it's pretty relevant. And so after inspectional reading, he talks about how you gotta ask questions about the book, about the structure of the book, about the message of the book, and how the author, what the intentions of the author are. And he just puts a lot of emphasis on asking the right questions. And yeah, he says he just emphasizes that you gotta practice, you know. There's no golden rule. He did mention a bunch of rules, but his main giveaway was that you gotta practice on making your own questions which you feel are relevant. So anyway, the third level is analytical reading. After you skim through the book, this time you go through it properly. And I forgot to mention, when you skim through the book, it's important to categorize, or it's important to recognize which parts of the book is important and which is skippable. And the author mentions how not every book should be read completely and it's a waste of time, but every book does have something to convey. And he uses the analogy of baseball and all that. But another analogy, he says it's a book is like a conversation that you're having with the author, and the end goal is to elevate yourself, to get on the author's, if the author's, you know, a reasonable man. He wrote this book with all the proofs and everything, and the main goal is to, if you agree with him, if you think he's smart, reasonable, logical, then you're trying to get to his position, his level mentally, by the information he gave you on this book. So he says, so yeah, you gotta read the book carefully. And after the fourth level, he calls it syntopical, right? And this is where he talks about like reading multiple books and just like connecting them and having your own personal takeaway, which you can't find in any of the books you've read. You make your own opinions, you suggest a hypothesis that is not yet been suggested by any of the books. So you know, it's kind of like a PhD, you know. You read all these studies, but you make your own synopsis. You made your own paper, basically, you know, research paper, thesis, whatever you like to call it. And so, and he also talks about fictional books. He says it's pretty worth. He does overemphasize it. There's a lot of filler in this book. That's why it's a 5. If it wasn't for all that, and because the message is so good, if you remove like a lot of filler, I would give this an 8. But again, I don't know if it's on purpose or not. And so yeah, he talks about fiction a lot. He emphasizes lyrics and poems, and he just repeats the same thing. So this book, you do have to, the second level about skimming, you really have to understand what you need to skip in this book. And so after that, he talks about, he just talks about criticism. He says that's also an important part of reading a book. And he says, first you gotta read the whole book, understand it. In anything you want to criticize, you have to understand it fairly, and then only you can criticize it. And he mentions like there's like 3 ways you can criticize. You can either say the author is uninformed, misinformed, illogical, or his message or his book is incomplete. And I feel like that's pretty good. That was pretty helpful, useful. Always be critical, question a lot. Whatever you're reading, question it. He also talks about how people are slow readers. That's because the eyes are not as fast as processing as the brain is. So it says use like a pointer or just your finger to like practice speed reading. And after that, yeah, that's it. That's basically the gist of it. I'm not gonna go into too much detail, because in this channel I want to emphasize how you should always do your own thing. You know, if I recommend a book, you should definitely read it. There's a lot of points that I have missed, and the author even talks about it. He says if you're listening to someone else's criticism or someone else's commentary on any piece of work, you gotta read it yourself, and then you gotta look at the commentary. But because you don't want to go through a book with like a predetermined mind, you want a blank slate, and you gotta make your own decisions. So definitely read the book by yourself. And now I feel like the one difficulty I have for my notes. But the one difficulty I had for this book is I did get distracted a lot. I feel like that is an issue for me, and I'm not gonna hide it. Again, this channel is about growing for myself and for you guys, and you guys can join me. So distraction is definitely it, and concentration, yeah. And I also feel like I just gotta practice the things that this book taught me. I gotta practice it, because I feel like I made a lot of the mistakes that he talks about how you just want to read the whole book, or you just have to go back on what you read because you're not actively reading it, you're not actively learning it. Your brain is just not unconscious, but it's not fully there. So that's it. I think I'll try to apply this, and the next book I will read is Study Like a Champ. But before that, I'm going to research about how I can improve my concentration, and this is for studying. And for my personal life, well, I'll make that another video. Peace.